everybody, it's Carol and Sherman from the Barrie Public Library, and we're here today to share another story with you called Extra Yarn. I hope you enjoy. Okay. Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clausen. Okay, let's move Sherman out of the way. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and she knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still some extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "Ha! You look ridiculous." See, Nate, he's sitting over there. "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. So Annabelle made Nate and his doggie a sweater. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog and one for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. Look, she's wound it around the trees. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. See how pretty and bright her sweater is? "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Well, then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so that they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out that she could. And she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and her dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone, except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. Looks like she made one for a bear and for a bunny. Soon, people thought Annabelle's going to run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Look, she made a sweater for the birdhouse and the bird and the mailbox and even the house. Oh my goodness. And look, that dull, sooty town. Look at how pretty it is now. Annabelle's made sweaters for the houses and the church and the stores. Things began to change in that little town. news spread of this remarkable girl who never, ever ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle.
"Little girl," said the Archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1,000,000.
No, thank you, said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The Archduke's mustache twitched.
2,000,000,
he said. Annabelle shook her head. No, thanks.
10,000,000, shouted the Archduke. Take it or leave it.
Leave it, said Annabelle. I won't sell the yarn. And she didn't. Oh, it's nighttime. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box. And they took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. There he goes with Annabelle's box. Back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair, and then he took out the box, and he lifted the lid, and he looked inside. Huh. Do you see what I see? His mustache quivered, it shivered, it trembled. His box was empty. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again. But, look at, he threw the box out the window and it seems to be floating across the ocean and to the river. And who's that? Is that Annabelle? I think she found her box again. And she was able to keep knitting. So even though the Archduke cursed her and said she would never be happy again, it turned out she was. And she got to bring color to all of her world and everyone around her. So that is the story of Extra Yarn. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.